Hello children, and welcome to Collective Worship today. I am going to start by sharing my screen, and as I share my screen, I'm sure you're all getting ready to know how we start every week, which is by saying, "This is the day that the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it." Okay, so children, we are thinking about the theme Changing Me in Jigsaw, and last week we talked about how we are all unique and special, and this week we're going to think about how we can express ourselves and how we feel when changes happen to us. Now, sometimes when we talk about change is something we can't help. It happens to us and there's nothing we can do about it. But there are things that we can change ourselves. And I'm going to actually share a story with you because I thought it would help us to really think about how certain things happen sometimes in our families that we can't help. And it helps us to understand some of our jigsaw themes when we listen to a story. And you do need to have your concentrating hats on this morning because there's only a couple of pictures, but it does make you think as you look at the picture. Okay, so I'm going to start my story. And this story is about a little girl called Greta. And Greta talks a lot about her grandma in this story, and ever since Greta was 5, Grandma had lived in a room downstairs in her house. Greta loved having Grandma living there with her because every day before school, Greta used to go and give Grandma a big hug before she said goodbye and went on her way. "See you later, alligator," Grandma would say. "In a while," Greta would shout back, and I've left out an important word there. "In a while, crocodile," sorry, I should have said. Greta always shouted that back to Grandma. Every day when Greta came home from school, she would go and see Grandma and tell her exactly what had happened during her school day. She also shared with Grandma some of the things that really troubled her. And somehow Greta's troubles never seemed very big as long as Grandma was always there in her flowery yellow chair. Then one day, Grandma moved out and she went to live in a special place on the other side of town. Instead of seeing Grandma every day, Greta now only saw her on Sundays. This was a big change for Greta. The flowery chair looked very sad and very empty. Greta felt very sad, very, very empty herself. She felt as though she didn't have anybody to talk to anymore. Mum explained to Greta that Grandma moved away because she wanted to make some more friends and not just live with their family. She said that Grandma was doing some dancing, playing dominoes, and even learning to paint. "I don't want Grandma to do all those things," cried Greta. "I want her here. I want her back. I want to talk to her every day because that's what I like to do." Mum tried to cheer Greta up by decorating her room in a lovely bright yellow colour, which was Greta's favourite colour. But when Greta saw it, all she said was, "I want it to be the way it used to be. I don't want it to change." Dad tried to cheer Greta up and he took her to the zoo, where she had always wanted to go. But Greta just said, "I don't like new places. I want things the way they used to be." One day at school, Greta's teacher talked to the class about change. At first, Greta tried to think about something else since Grandma had moved out. She didn't want to talk to anybody about change because she didn't like it. She wanted things to always stay the same. But the teacher said, "Remember, children, nothing stays the same forever. Everything has to change." Greta began to listen. "I know it can be very difficult when a change happens that you don't want," said the teacher, "but sometimes we can make things a bit better when we make a change for ourselves." Greta listened even harder. The teacher asked the children to think about something they could do to make a change in themselves, even if it was just a tiny little change. It might make somebody feel better. Greta thought long and hard. She thought about all the people in her life. She thought about her grandma. She pretended in her head that Grandma was sitting in the flowery chair, and she thought she knew what Grandma would say. At home time that day, Greta was the last to leave. As she walked out of the classroom, she turned to her teacher and she said, "Thank you for being my teacher and helping me." Her teacher looked really pleased, and as Greta walked away, she could hear him whistling as he sorted out the classroom. What a lovely thing to do, thought the teacher, to say thank you. When she got home and had her tea and helped her mum tidy away, she then said to her mum, "Thank you for being my mum and for decorating my room and for everything." Mum looked so pleased and so surprised that Greta was being so kind. She gave Greta a big hug. When she went out of the kitchen, she could hear her mum singing to herself. She'd obviously made her mum very happy. When Dad came home, Greta said to him, "Thank you for being my dad and for taking me to the zoo." Dad's face beamed with the biggest smile ever. But Greta knew there was something she still had to do that was very, very important. She went and found a piece of paper. She went up to her room. She actually thought, I think I need to go into Grandma's old room to do this. She stayed there for a long time until Mum told her it was time to go to bed. The next day, Mum took her to a special shop and she bought something with all her pocket money. On Sunday, Mum and Greta went to see Grandma. Greta ran over to see her and gave her the biggest hug in the world. And then she gave her a parcel. "It's not my birthday. What on earth is this?" said Grandma. She opened it up and inside was a beautiful picture frame. And in it, there was a picture of Grandma and Greta sitting next to her. "I drew it myself," said Greta, "and I brought the frame with my own money. It's to say thank you for being my grandma and to remind you of how things used to be when you sat in your flowery chair in our house." Grandma smiled the biggest smile ever. "Well, Greta, thank you for being my wonderful granddaughter. I've told all the people that live here about you. I can't wait to show them this beautiful picture." Greta thought for a minute and then she said, "I hope it doesn't make you sad looking at the picture, Grandma. After all, nothing stays the same forever, you know. Everything has to change." Grandma smiled again. "I'll do you a deal," she said. "I won't be sad if you won't." "Okay," said Greta, and she smiled too. And that was the story of Grandma and Greta. Now that was very interesting, wasn't it? Because at the beginning of the story, Greta could think about nothing other than the fact that Grandma had gone and she didn't want anything to change. And then she listened to what her teacher said. And it's really important that you listen to grown-ups when you're at school. And the teacher said it was really important to think about something that you could do. And that's maybe we should think, was the teacher talking to Greta, but maybe telling us all something? Could we all make a little change in something we do to make us feel better? And it worked with Greta. She stopped thinking about herself and she started thinking about everybody else. And saying thank you was a really important part of making a big difference for Greta. Now, something I'd like you to think about, and you were really, really good at doing things for Mrs. Robertson, because last week I asked you all to think about our new Christian value, respect. And you all did that. I haven't had a chance to look at all of them yet, but I did notice I had lots and lots of acrostic poems using the word respect. But this week, this is what Mrs. Robertson wants you to do. I want you to think about your friends. I want you to think about all the grown-ups in your life. How many people can you say thank you to? And think about something that you need to say thank you for. It could be something really, really small. It could be something that you want to say to your teacher. Thank you for being my teacher. Thank you for being my mum. Thank you for being my friend. But have a little think and can you explain why? So that's what I want you to think about this week, because we're thinking about how change makes us feel and being able to talk about it. There's a couple of pictures there showing you the importance of talking about things that maybe make you sad, talking about things you find difficult, just like Greta did. It's really important to remember we should always talk to somebody if we're worried about something. Now, what I'd like you to do is to either close your eyes, or those of you that would like to read it with Mrs. Robertson, don't read it out loud, because this is a time where we can just sit and have some reflection time. We're going to think about the story actually in this prayer and think about Greta. And let's think about what we might do after we've heard this prayer. So put your hands together or just sit quietly and listen. Dear God, help us to find a still, quiet place inside ourselves. Let us remember Greta and the changes she made to her own and other people's lives by remembering to thank them for what they had done for her. Help us to think of a change, however small, we could make for ourselves that might help someone else. It could be something as small as a smile or a kind word. Help us all to be thoughtful and kind. Amen. Okay, so I hope you've all listened and enjoyed that story about Greta and her grandma. And I'd like to hear about some of those thank yous, some of those special words and thoughts that you might be giving to someone else. So this week, we're not thinking about ourselves, we're thinking about how you can express to somebody how you might like to say thank you, and you might be making a little change inside yourself by doing that. Some of you say thank you all the time, but some of you might just need to have a little think about that. And that could be a change that you're making this week. If you're really good at saying thank you already, think about something else you might need to do that could help someone else. Well, you've all listened really well, and I hope you all have a really good week, and I'll look forward to seeing you all soon. So I'm going to finish collective worship by saying, this is the day that the Lord has made. Let us all rejoice and be glad in it. Thank you for listening, children, and I'll see you all very soon. Bye for now. Bye.